Okay, hello. We're going to talk about Unit 3 today. So we're going to talk about how you get your cargo transported. So I put a gold star on this slide because this is on your test and there are a lot of questions about this and every one of them is worth 4 points. So you need to know the difference. What I'm going to give you is I'm going to say logistical service providers for importers and exporters, and it's going to be brokers, forwarders, both brokers and forwarders. And you're going to need to know that in the instance of that one, the answer is C, brokers and forwarders, because they're both logistical service providers for importers and exporters. Brokers are focused on inbound shipments. They provide customs clearance and other regulatory compliance. They're usually hired by the importer. So think about that. That should make sense to you. Inbound importer, right? If they were only exporter, then that would be outbound. They have to be licensed. They have to take a background check and they have to do testing. And the way that you are the most effective using brokers is to have a small number of them, because the more you spend with a broker, the more services they're likely to perform for you. Switching over to forwarders, and just to remind you from Unit 2, forwarders are our moving truck example. So forwarders are consolidators. They are also a logistical service provider for importers and exporters, but they're focused on outbound shipments. So think about that moving truck again, outbound. That should make sense to you. Should also make sense to you that if it's outbound, they're going to be engaged by the exporter because it's something that's being shipped out. Often they will clear customs. They often have warehouses. So if you need to ship something and it's not ready to go yet, they will hold it for you for a few days until the boat or the ship is ready to go, or until the airline's ready to take it, something like that. And also on your test, they are licensed by the Federal Maritime Commission. This specific slide, I think, is worth about 35 or 40 points out of 200 on your test. So please study this and know which one is which. Power of attorney. You may have heard of this in your personal life. So let's say that you're sick, or let's say that you're going to travel out of the country for a few months and someone might need to be able to get into your bank account or take care of your children or make decisions for an ill parent or something, and you can give them a power of attorney. Power of attorney means that you have the ability to sign and act in place of the person who has given you power of attorney. So if I sign a power of attorney to a broker, that means they can receive goods on my behalf, they can clear goods out of customs on my behalf, etc. That form 5291, and just to let you know, it's pronounced 5291. People would not say a 5291. Just like if you think about your taxes, you wouldn't say that you're filing a 1040. You would say that you're filing a 1040. So a 5291 is the U.S. Customs form for a power of attorney. The purpose, this is on your test, is to be sure that you don't blame the broker if you violate something. That you don't say, oh, they shouldn't have, they did that illegally, they didn't have the right clearance, they didn't have the right certificate, something happened. The reason that you have that is to say, I'm acting on your behalf. And so that's the reason that they want you to have a power of attorney. There's a quick little video there on YouTube I gave you a link to. I suggest you take a look at that. So terms and conditions with your customs broker, and just to remind you from Unit 1, we talk about these, we call them the T's and C's. There are some differences. If you're going to use FedEx or UPS or somebody like that, that's usually a one-time deal or an every once in a while kind of thing. And so the person shipping, I don't go to FedEx and say, I want you to overnight this shipment to my family in Michigan, and then try to negotiate with them about what the terms will be, right? I don't do it often, so I just accept whatever terms FedEx or UPS has. With a broker, you have a relationship, and so you set up an agreement and you negotiate terms that make sense for both of you. So it's a little different. So on your test again, you see the gold star here. The customs broker, so just as a note, primarily the regulations are set up for the benefit of the Customs Border Protection Department, not for the broker. But it is the duty of the customs broker not to withhold information and not to give any false information, and to make sure that they exercise due diligence that all the information they provide is correct. So due diligence means that what a reasonable person would expect. If I give you something and tell you that my name is David Smith, you're going to look at me and say, you're a woman. That's probably not good ID for you. David Smith, let me see the picture. This is not even you. Things like that. What a reasonable person would do. So due diligence to make sure that all the information that they provide to the CBP is correct and that they do not withhold or give anything that's false. I didn't put this on your test, but I did want you to know that you have lots of people have an arrangement with a company that they call a foreign purchasing representative. Sometimes they're called FPs, sometimes they're called FPRs. And what that means is that you do not have to set up the expense. Actually, this is on your test. I just realized this is on your test. It's a fill in the blank. So there's 3 or 4 questions. So you don't have to set up an office in Spain if you want to do business with a company in Spain. You can set it up so it mitigates the expense or the cost of establishing a local office. It allows the importer to look at multiple sources or multiple suppliers for the same product. And it allows somebody to have the ability to inspect the equipment or the shipment before it ships because they're already in that country. So these contracts are usually extremely detailed about the duties or the responsibilities that the FP will have. So the questions that you're going to find on the test here are going to ask you to fill in the words like expense, sources, money, saving money, and that they have very specific duties or very specific responsibilities. Country of origin is also on your test. Country of origin is, if you just exactly what it sounds like, where was this made? And there are a lot of rules about this. You did an exercise on this as part of your homework this week. But it's very important to know where things come from so that we know how they should be tariffed, what the duties should be, and that's very important, especially as it relates to NAFTA. You should have understood this and done the exercises for the article and the quiz that you took this week. Okay, entry, summary, and liquidation. So liquidation, during the process of bringing something in, you pay an estimated amount and you file some paperwork that says my goods have come into the United States in the last 10 days. You have 10 days to do it. Usually you do it immediately, but there's some reasons why they give you some extra time if you need it. And a lot of people, I won't say most, a lot of people think, okay, well, that's all, I'm done. But that's not true. You've paid an estimated amount, so the United States Customs and Border Protection is going to look at the shipment and say, you said this was X. They're going to verify that it is in fact what you said it was. And then if there's any additional money that you owe because maybe you misquoted the weight, maybe you misquoted the count. I mean, any of these things is a very serious problem. We hope you don't ever have these problems. But if you don't have it correct, then they're going to come back to you for liquidation and they're going to tell you, you owe an extra whatever. I don't know if you've ever received anything in the mail where it came and the person maybe had put 1 stamp on it, but really it was too heavy and it needed 2 stamps. The post office will deliver it sometimes, but they call it postage due. So before they'll release it to you, they want the extra 15 cents or whatever it is. Liquidation is a similar concept where they're going to say, you estimated what you thought you owed. We're coming back and telling you that it's a little bit more. And once that liquidation has been done, then it's legal entry into the country. I did not put this on your test at all, but I just want you to know there's something called an HS, a harmonized system. And the harmonized system is just a coding system to let people know what things are. So a TV is not going to be taxed the same way that a t-shirt is going to be. And so they have different harmonized system codes. Most of the countries in the world use this, but I didn't put it on the test. It's not something that you would need to know, but I just want you to know what it is. There's also one that's used by people in the United States, and they're pretty similar, but I just wanted you to know what this is. I did also put you a note that due to the different number of digits, it's easy to tell if it's an HTSUS or a simple HS code by how many digits. All right, the perfect entry. So you're importing something to have no problems whatsoever. The carrier. So let's think this could be an airline. This could be a shipping company that has big sea ships, whatever it is. notifies the importer, so me, that the goods have arrived. They turn the paperwork over to my customs broker that's at the Port of Houston and has already accepted the goods on my behalf. They file the entry. The CBP decides that they're not going to examine my shipment. They're not going to open my sea container and count everything or double check that everything is what I say it is. They do an examination and they say everything was fine. The freight's released. My customs broker gets it. They put it on a truck or they put it on a rail car. They do whatever they have to do to get it to me. 10 days later, they submit the entry summary. They pay any duty that's necessary, and all of that means that the summary is bypassed or it's liquidated and everything's perfect. Now, that doesn't always happen. Here's a less than perfect but an okay entry. Okay, it's not great, it's not perfect, but it's not going to hold my goods. It's not going to cause a lot of problem or disruption to my business. Customs Border Patrol decides to examine and they find a problem. So they say, you say the country of origin of this was X, but we really think now that we've looked at this that maybe the country of origin should have been declared as Y due to the content of the goods. Maybe there's some electronics inside that were made and imported and you didn't do it. So a marking notice is issued. So now the customs broker arranges for the mark. He accepts it. The CBP says okay, and they release my goods. After we pay the new duty, an import specialist is going to look at the paperwork and say, oh my gosh, you called this a TV, but it's really a computer monitor, and you should have chosen a different code. It's not a TV. And so it should have been calculated differently. So the entry is going to liquidate. They're going to tell you, you paid $100, you should have paid $110. You need to give us $10, and you pay that money and everything's fine. And now this is a very bad entry. So the merchandise arrives, it's not marked or the value on it is wrong. It's really worth, the CBP says it's really worth $1,000 and you only put $200 on your paperwork. The customs broker tries to reach me, but I'm traveling. I can't be reached. I'm out of the country. I decided that with COVID, I just had to go to Mexico and I turned my phone off. So the freight, now the customs broker can't do anything about it till he talks to me and he can't reach me. So it's just sitting there on the dock. Well, they're not going to store that for free. So they put it into their warehouse and they start charging me every single day for storing my freight because they have to do it. So also we're in trouble now because we're going to have to file late. We only had 10 days and we're going to file our paperwork late. So I come back to the United States and I realize that my goods have been seized now by the CBP, and the customers that I was going to sell those goods to said this is taking too long and they wouldn't bought them somewhere else. So now, I made this kind of funny, but I said now I have to sell my fancy house, pay the penalties, pay the storage, pay the other fees, and my goods are obsolete because the person I was going to sell them to went to another person and bought them from someone else. So all of this obviously is a little exaggerated, but I just want you to know it's very, very important that the paperwork is perfect. It's not a place to be sloppy or in a hurry. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be perfect every single time. All right. Now we're going to talk about free trade. This is an assignment that you're going to do during this next coming week where you're going to go onto a discussion board on Canvas and you're going to talk about free trade. There's a couple of slides in here that'll give you some background. I also gave you a document in a link in the actual assignment in Canvas that said if you're still not sure what your position on free trade is, here's some information that can give you some differing sides of the issue and you can make your own decision. Every one of these is on your test. So you need to know what all these things mean. I would read through them. I think let's go from the bottom. I think you know what a free trade agreement is. Well, a free trade agreement says between the countries who are signatories or signers of this free trade agreement, there will be no tariffs, there will be no quotas. So an example of a free trade agreement, you're going to do an assignment on this as well, is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, the ASEAN agreement. There are several. Mercosur is one. The European Union is even a further integration beyond a free trade agreement to a union. They share currency. There's a whole bunch of other things that make it even one step more integrated than a free trade agreement. We talked a little bit earlier about the WTO in Unit 2, but the World Trade Agreement, or World Trade Organization, you should know what that is. You need to understand what most favored nation and national treatment are. National treatment is the first obligation of free trade. And once it says if it's in the marketplace, it needs to be treated the same way as if it had been produced in my country. So I can't say this pen I made in the United States is priced one way, but this other pen that's the same that was made in another country is going to be treated differently. It's going to be taxed differently. It's going to, anything like that. It cannot be managed differently. It can't be regulated differently. You can't say, these cannot be sold in convenience stores because they were made in another country, but the ones exactly like them that were made in the United States can be. Or they can't be taxed. They can't be regulated. There can't be any difference. Most favored nation says that if there is an agreement between country A and country B, that country A has to give country C, D, and E the same preferences if they are all considered most favored nation. And then FTAs limit the ability of states to use import-export controls to regulate the movement of goods and services. So even when national treatment and most favored nation are part of the situation, the state is not required to do anything further with free trade. So I want to make sure you know what these are. These are all matching on your exam, so you just need to be prepared knowing which thing is which thing. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of arguments in favor of free trade. This is on your test as well. The reason the words creating wealth are in bold is because that's going to be your fill in the blank on the test. So pushes countries to become richer by creating wealth. That's one of the things that free trade does. They maintain tariffs function to maintain competitiveness of the domestic product. So if I know that it's going to cost me a little bit more to make something than it costs, for example, China to make it and get it here, I may tariff the Chinese product higher so that I can make it competitive for the United States produced good. Comparative advantage, we talked about that last in Unit 1, and you did a little exercise on it. That's definitely something that's there. There's also a 12-point question at the end of the exam where you have to choose from one of 5 questions, and one of the questions is explaining comparative advantage. So you should definitely know which one of these you want to answer, but comparative advantage is one of them. All right, so some facts. So empirical means that it can be supported by facts. Every country that has gone down the road of free trade has been successful. Even Chile and Taiwan, their dictators said, we're going to follow this free trade policy. But even the countries that say that they want free trade cheat. The United States is a perfect example. We tout free trade all over the international community, but we put tariffs, we put quotas, we put subsidies, we put embargoes on other countries because we want to make sure we're protecting American jobs. The most complex economies tend to cheat in the areas of the economy that are low wage. So we want to protect our lower wage jobs. And so that is a very, very interesting thing. And then the third bullet there is very interesting. The advantages of free trade are thin and spread widely, but the pain of free trade is very, very concentrated and very severe. You can read this yourself. I don't need to read this to you, but the 10 benefits of the World Trade Organizational multilateral trading systems. And multilateral means many-sided, so many countries have this WTO. So this is advantages to the WTO trading system. It keeps the peace. It allows disputes to be handled easily and constructively in one place where everyone trusts that it will be dealt with fairly because the system is based on rules. A small country with a very small economy has the same vote as the United States or Russia or China or Japan. It makes products that people need and the cost of living less expensive. It gives consumers more choice because they have more places that they can buy products from. Lower trade barriers. It stimulates growth. The system economically is much more efficient. It shields the governments from narrow interests. So if I have one big industry coming to me and trying to get me to make trade policy to support them, I have the WTO trading system kind of helps balance that up, and it encourages good government and kind of discipline. So that's the end of Unit 3.